Welcome to Chautauqua People. My name is John V. My guest today is Ayers. She's a native of Denver, Colorado, and graduated from Georgetown University and the University of Virginia Law School, and has practiced law in French, recently finished her tour as Dean of the Women's College at University of Denver in Colorado. She will be joining an organization titled Raise the Future. She's the mother of 4 boys and the 3rd member of the Chautauqua family to sit at the Chautauqua People table. Welcome to Chautauqua People.
It is so nice to be here. Thank you so much. I've long admired your work, and I'm glad to be keeping up with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law.
Great. So now you got one up on us.
Right.
I'm more recent than you are. So tell us about your experience at France and how you got there and licensing requirements and the like, what you did.
Yeah. I have, my mom is one of 10 kids, and one of my favorite uncles, but we didn't really say that out loud, but he married a French woman. And so from the time I was really little, I just admired her. She was spectacularly beautiful, looked a lot like Jacqueline Kennedy, and she spoke French. So I just wanted to learn the language, and I did. And then, so when I got to Georgetown, I majored in French. And when I went to law school, I had an opportunity between my first and second year to go work in the OECD in Paris. And I took that a step further and did some interviewing and landed a job for after school, and the rest was history. So that was really fun to be able to practice law over there. I joke, I left law after I left France, and I sometimes wonder if it was, the French, or if it was the French legal system, or if it was just law in general. Mm-hmm. But it was tough, right? It's a different legal system. So
yeah. Now, did you have to pass a French bar exam, or what was the nature of your work?
So I went and practiced. I graduated law school in 1998, and so that's sort of the beginning, or actually kind of the heart of the .com boom, right, that's going on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what was happening at the time that I interviewed was that there was a lot of outbound work. So it was French investment in U.S. companies that were coming out of Silicon Valley. The nature of that would be to practice American law. Mm-hmm. And so I had taken the New York bar and went over there prepared to do that, but you interview for these jobs about 12 months before you actually get into the seat. By the time I got over there, the economy had shifted, and there was all of this American investment in Paris. And so luckily it's a civil code system, so I didn't take the French bar. In fact, Americans were not allowed to sit for the French bar.
Really?
During a small period of time, and that was right at the end of that. And so I had to use my New York bar and have the partners in my law office sign off on it. But really, I just had to learn the civil code. I had 21 books. There were these red books, and you kind of learn them. So it's much different than a common law system. And thank heavens it was that way. Mm-hmm. So we would practice, merger and acquisition. I did large-scale M&A work internationally, across several continents actually, and then they would come back in and they would say, and by the way, can you write some new testamentary documents for the CEO? But because it's a civil system, you could really do M&A and trust and estates.
So did you write that in French or in English, or?
I did the vast majority of my work in French. So
wow.
A little bit, occasionally a little bit of Japanese, which I had dabbled in, and across multiple time zones. I think the hardest part, just physically, was that as soon as, we'd wake up earlier in the morning in Paris, and as soon as we were sort of about ready to have the end of our day, New York would wake up and send us a whole another slew of documents. I billed 3,400 hours my first year. Mm-hmm. To put that in perspective, anywhere between 18 and 2,200 hours is sort of a typical year.
Whoa.
So I didn't see a whole lot of Paris that first year.
So you were working mighty hard.
I was, yeah.
How long were you there in Paris then?
So, the 3 years then. And I had actually spent a little bit of time, we had a French family who came to live in Denver. So in addition to my French aunt, there were, my grandfather, I think, just befriended these 2 sugar engineers. They came to work for Western Sugar Company and teach us how to make beet sugar in Colorado. And they took me, we just got to be very dear friends. So mm-hmm. They took me over to live with them one summer between 8th and 9th grade. And then I went back subsequent summers, and I also spent my junior year abroad. So all told, I've probably spent about 5-6 years living in
mm-hmm.
France.
And what area of Paris did you live? Do you remember?
Yes, we lived in the 6th
Okay.
on Rue de l'Odéon.
Got it.
So, which is just, the little bit sort of the Latin Quarter between and then the little bit more sort of posh 7th. But a really wonderful place to live.
And
Alive.
great experience to be overseas like that.
It was wonderful. And so my husband, Mark, we joke because, let me think about this. We were married during our first year there. So we moved over in about September. We came home for the wedding in January. We moved back over, and he has very passable French, but he understands perhaps more than he can conjure. And so I ended up doing a lot of the work over there. And we had, with the plumbers and the leases and that sort of thing, I just sort of ended up taking the lead on it. And we had this very funny thing happen, which was, the naive sort of Americans didn't realize that the French just shut off for the month of August entirely. And so we had gotten this note that said, we'll be doing a little bit of plumbing in your building. We lived in a 5th-story walk-up, beautiful apartment, but a lot of stairs, 98 to be specific. And so we left the key with the concierge all week long. And it wasn't until about, I think on Thursday, there were like some cigarette ashes by the toilet. We went in. Friday night, Mark calls me as I'm leaving work, and he says, I think we should probably go out for a drink before we go home. And we had a friend who was there visiting us, and I said, well, why? And he said, because when you go into our bathroom, you can see 5 stories down. And so they were actually replacing the sewage pipe, and all the rest of the families were gone. But we had no idea. So we walked in. I think that the hole in our bathroom floor was about as big as this table. And the toilet was sort of sitting like this on the edge of a pipe. And so the next morning I heard Mark, whose French was, like I said, not quite as up to speed as mine, and I heard him going through the dictionary, and he's marking all these words, and I can hear him, and it's like 6:30, and people, they don't answer the phone at 6:30 necessarily in France, or didn't then, and I hear him say, do you know what I'm looking at? He said, I am looking at my neighbor's bottom, because you could see all these floors all the way down. And that was like my favorite French sentence he ever said. So 40 days later, even working for a law firm, we finally got it fixed. But it was a long, that's tough to start your marriage with half a bathroom.
You bet. You bet. So indeed, you finished. Did you acquire French citizenship when you were there?
We did not. We
Okay.
did not, no.
Okay. So no dual citizenship, remain American.
We remained American, and we got out so the tax treaty, you're allowed to pay effectively American taxes for the first 5 years that you're there, and we left after about 3 years. And that was part of it, and part of it was wanting to come home and start a family, near family, so to speak. So that was what drove
Good to
all
go.
that. Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. And can you tell me about your duties there with the Women's College, University of Denver?
So, I'm not an academic by trade, and the University of Denver has 12 colleges, and one of them is the Colorado Women's College. And actually, upon my departure, that was kind of integrated and absorbed into some of the other schools. But so my job there was to figure out, how do you support women, how do you imagine a women's college differently, and how do you support women across 12,000 students, as opposed to just with a limited number of degrees in one edifice, right? How do we kind of branch that out? And they brought me in. I'm a builder. I did mergers and acquisitions work, and then I did a lot of business development work, and I've built brands and communications and strategies my whole career, and they wanted me to build something new. So indeed we did. We built a women's leadership program for first-generation college-going women. Typically, first-gen women have about a 54%, between 54 and 60% retention rate, graduation within 5 years. Ours are on track for 98%. So we really.
So let's punctuate the point. The custom was about 54% as you anticipate, and your students were at 98%.
Yeah, we were holding on to 98% of our students, that they were staying with the university and finishing in for sometimes 5 years. And really, if you think, I learned so much from this incredible group of young women, and they were, so they arrive at 18 years old, their parents hadn't gone to college, and so I would get questions like, what's orientation? Really what you think would be very basic stuff, And parents who would call me and they would say, I know what happens to young women on college campuses. I'm not going to be letting my daughter live on campus. So a lot of our students ended up being commuter students. And many of them were young women of color. And how do you survive on a predominantly white campus, which is what the University of Denver is, and thrive and be in that environment? And so what we did was we gave them a home at the Colorado Women's College, and some phenomenal faculty, and they studied leadership with us while they majored in things all across the rest of the campus. But I think when you give people a sense of belonging, you can really make a difference. So, and I learned about belonging here, by the way.
Tell me more.
Chautauqua. So, about belonging in
Indeed,
Chautauqua.
what you learned at Chautauqua.
Yeah. Well, and you were incredibly helpful through what was a really difficult time, I think, for Mark and me. So when we moved back to the United States and wanted to start our family, we had a son in 2003. His name is Timothy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born in July. And then in, I think it was in June of 2004, he was diagnosed with Sandhoff's disease. Sandhoff's is the non-Jewish version of Tay-Sachs, if you've ever heard of that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a fatal disease that manifests a bit like ALS. So you lose all of your physical functioning, but you don't lose your mental functioning. And it is something else to kind of get that diagnosis, right? And so it just almost takes my breath away for a second to talk about it. So we needed support, and we needed people to help us find the right doctors, and we needed people to help us take care of ourselves. And Chautauqua was amazing. Our friends and family here were incredibly supportive. We moved to your neck of the woods. We moved to Durham, North Carolina, because it was the only doctor in the country who knew how to, or who was willing to try a cure for Sandhoff's, which is a bone marrow transplant. And Timothy died on day 90 of that transplant from an opportunistic infection. And then, so that was in about November. It was on November 20th. And I don't remember a whole lot of the next several months. I mean, I think you just kind of feel like you're, I had somebody tell me once, you almost feel like your skin is sort of missing. You just don't have a lot of insulation from the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do know and remember is our Chautauqua friends, they called, they visited, they came in droves to the funeral, which is all the way out in, Denver, and that's a little bit far for them. That July, we came to Chautauqua, and we actually didn't know specifically what they were doing. They said, come down to the basketball courts. And we knew there was going to be something going on for Timothy to celebrate. And we get down to the basketball courts, and all of these people, so people that Mark and I were we worked in the Boys and Girls Club. He worked there many more years than me,
Mm-hmm.
than I did, but our groupers were there. Family, friends. I mean, I think there were about 200 people, and they showed up to play a basketball tournament, and each team had an entry fee, and they were raising money to find a cure for Sandhoff's. They had a silent auction, and I just remember walking onto that court and thinking, I'm going to live again, right? Like, it was like the wind beneath your wing. I mean, I just thought, I can do this. I can totally do this now. And it was just extraordinary that this family would pull that off. And so when I think about going into a foreign situation, right, I didn't know about losing a child and what that would be like and how to carry my family forward. I think about how important it is to be in a place where you belong. And so that wasn't lost on me when I wanted to, oversee and help grow this leadership program, was how do we create home for them?
Right.
Where they know that no matter what happens, the very worst could possibly happen, and we still got you. And you know a little bit about that tournament. I don't know if you want to chat about that, but it kind of
Very
grew.
little. But let's talk about the follow-on. And just quickly, I was on the board of trustees at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some very tough questions about establishing a playground and how to go about it, how to play politics with the institution.
Yeah.
And I shared my knowledge and said, listen, if you need somebody to argue with them and stomp their feet, come back and see me. But tell me the process, and let's take a look, once we get through the establishment, let's take a look at the playground as it emerged.
Let's do. So after a certain number of years, we moved to kickball, which was important because we were all, hurting our hamstrings and things. But we also moved a little bit past saying, let's raise money just for Sandhoffs. And one of our friends said to us, now, why don't we create something that puts joy back in the world? I just loved how she put that. I remember we were in Bester Plaza, and 2 or 3 got together, and she said, let's put joy in the world in Timothy's name. And what about a playground? Because the playground that Mark and his friends had all grown up on wasn't there anymore. And that had been down by Children's Beach at the Bell Tower. So we went to Jack Volker and chatted with him about what this might look like. And he explained to us probably what you knew, these long-term plans about a road and a variety of other things. And patience was part of this game. That was 7 years before we actually were able to put the playground where you see it today, which is in this picture, down near the Bell Tower.
It was persistence too, wasn't it?
It was persistence, it was patience, it was a lot of faith. And so in about April of 2016, I get this phone call, and they say, this is it, we're gonna do the playground this year. And I'm thinking, we haven't designed the playground. You can't put hammer to nail in Chautauqua after the tapping of the gavel. So we were able to remarkably find a group in California, and Daniel's Woodland is the name of it, and I called them and I explained the story, and I said, could you manufacture this playground? Because we wanted something that was natural, we wanted something that was in keeping with the beauty of Chautauqua. And they said, we're 2 years out. And then she called me back the next day. She said, I told the team your story, and we don't hire more people because we like to keep the integrity of what we're doing, but they're going to work weekends. And so they worked weekends until about mid-May, and then they put it on a truck. We followed it on Facebook across the country as it came. And then I got a call from a man named John Stowe, and he called up and he said, I am the person on the grounds crew that's going to be helping to install this. And we have had to cut down a number of trees because we were redoing the amphitheater around that same time. And a lot of people are so sad about these trees. He said, and I happen to be a chainsaw artist. Could I add to your playground? Could I put a stump jump course? Could I put benches? Could we build some other pieces? And so I said, of course you could. That would be terrific. And so he built all of that, and it just looks terrific.
Can we see some more pictures?
Yeah. So this is fun. This is the crew of people who really kind of these were the original ideators. Now we still do this kickball tournament. We did it a few weeks ago, and we probably do have anywhere from 150 to 250 people who show up. So this team has grown, but these are really the 4 or 5 families who came up with it. These are some of Mark's best friends in the whole world. I've got a former grouper in there. You see Katie Cook, who's in there, and her husband Kevin, and and you have some family members in there too.
I see 2 of them.
I see 2 of them too. So Melissa and Andy V were just terrific, and Susie and Rich Davis, and the Steckers, and the Tanneries. The Roberts is her maiden name, of course. So they dreamed this up, and that's what I mean, like just by being, held together in a terrific way. And I think we have a couple more pictures too.
Let's see what we got here.
Oh, so this is John Stowe, who's putting the license plate on this. And now I'm standing up at that first one, you saw the picture, and standing at the podium, and Mark and I were asked to make a few remarks. And I looked out, and I knew every face, except this one. And John Stowe must be like 6'8", or he's a giant. He feels like Paul Bunyan. And he was just sobbing, standing there. And he walked closer and closer to the podium as Mark and I were talking, and I didn't know him, and I didn't realize it was the person I'd been talking to on the phone about doing the chainsaw work. So he comes up and he raises his hand, and he says, I'm John Stowe. He said, I built that bench and built this thing, and then he said, and I built that car. So this is actually the front of a car that we're looking at. And he took a big tree on its side, he built this car, he took a tractor, steering wheel, and then his 2 kids popped out from behind him. And he said, and he's like Paul Bunyan, I said, so they come out from behind him, and they appear. And he said, my kids wanted to be a part of this. And so I took them into the woodworking shop, and they carved TMR, so Timothy Mark Rotacco, they carved his initials into the license plate. And Paul Bunyan pulled a drill out of his back pocket and he said, and I would like the kids who are here to drill the license plates into the car. So that's what they did that day, which was really cool. And I think my kids, the kids of all of our friends, we run the tournament and we get entry fees, but we also have a lemonade stand, and kids run lemonade stands throughout the summer. So I think many of the kids have said to me, oh, that's the playground I built, which is so cool to, think about the fact that they put their heart and soul into it too.
And so it's there and it gets preserved, and it's fun to go down and see another cohort of kids playing on that.
And to see it in the daily, they plan some of the kids events and they say, meet down at Timothy's Playground for arts and crafts or board games, things like that. So it's fun.
What's this?
Oh, so that day, this was, we did the tournament, or we did the dedication, and then we had a tradition, which is probably now not very eco-friendly. So we did a little something different this year, but back then we would release balloons just in honor of Timothy. So we did this on the children's beach, and then we all ran down to Sharp Field that day. And you can kind of see different teams have different colored shirts. So you can see Team Taco there. I think that's my nephew Christian who's wearing that shirt. And the cheese balls wear these bright orange shirts. Your family is really involved in the fireballs. We have the ring pops, and they just keep coming. I think the most we've had has been 12 teams. The Keogh family really won this year, and they just were amazing. And the Oliver family comes as the Texas Tornadoes. They probably have won the most times. Everybody's gunning for them. So.
and a great Chautauqua tradition now, isn't it? They have some fun,
it is.
And the money maintains the facility there.
Yeah. And this is the last piece. These are, I just love this picture. These actually probably might not recognize. This is some of my family and my French family on the end there. So we had people fly in from all around the country for this dedication, and this was a party that we had the night of the dedication. And to me, just this huge sign that my sister sent in. She's a bit artistic, and she sent this, and just that love can build anything. And to me, that's what Chautauqua is about. I mean, it really is.
That's
It's just a
magnificent.
new place, yeah.
Magnificent story. Let's switch gears just a little bit here.
Sorry.
And let me ask you about your ideas on leadership and the future of higher education.
Boy, there's going to have to be a lot of creativity, John, I think, in this area. Let me see if I can tie a few things together here.
Deal.
I learned so much and continue to learn in Chautauqua about the connection between community and leadership, right? And that really your power as a leader and what you do and your ability to get things done comes from the community, and how big you can make the community and how excited those folks get, and how community can be helpful in crisis. And I saw this on the campus during COVID for sure. We were really counting on needing to hear from the community. What do you need? How can we help you? And how do we listen differently? I have 3 rules of leadership that I think about all the time, and one is from my father, who I would hike with a lot. He was an outfitter, and he'd always walk behind me. And he's like, size 12 feet, and I would think, why are you doing that? You could so much better cast a path. And one morning we went hiking before dawn, and he put a headlamp on. And I realized, as the headlamp, shone over the top of my head, what he was really doing was showing me where to go, but not, doing it in a commanding way. So I think as a leader, one of the things that we have to do in education is lead that way. We have to shine a light. We don't pinpoint it, right? Because you've got to let students make choices and faculty do research and do it broadly. And that takes a different kind of humility than sometimes I see in higher education. It's about creating the right circumstances for people to learn and not actually telling them what to learn.
Right.
I think that's important. One of the other ones is about how do you incentivize people, and we need to work on that, I think, in higher education. I always like to tie a story to what I think about in leadership, and I have a son who was playing basketball at like 7 years old, I think, and they're running up and down the court. I'm so proud of the fact that they are actually making baskets and doing things. And then at halftime, the coach brought out this huge bling, this big necklace that and I think he must have said to them, you can wear this if you get a rebound. You can come off the bench and this is great. Like I think Miami has the Miami football team has that tradition. And so sure enough, the second half starts, and I stand up and I look and I'm like, where is he? And I kind of couldn't see him, and I had to stand up a little bit more, and I see him, and he's not running with the rest of the team. He's standing under the basket like this. He's like, I really want that bling.
Yeah.
So for me, I think about what are we incentivizing people to do? And we've got these tracks. We've got this 4-year degree. We've got these graduate diplomas, and maybe instead of putting people into tracks, what we need to do is incentivize them to make their own tracks. It's what we see employers wanting folks to do, and it's what we think that the people in higher education are wanting to do, the students. So we have to think about ways to incentivize people differently. It can't just be about the diploma and then the work and the paycheck that comes after.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be about incentivizing them to truly be lifelong learners.
And getting to know them and saying what's really important to them.
Right.
And
Right.
pulling it in.
Yeah.
Now, when we talked, you had some predictions, observations about the future of higher education in the next decade. Could you share some of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I've got 2 11-year-olds myself, and I really wonder if they're going to need to have a 4-year degree, and if that's what they're going to want to do with their time in higher education. Certainly, they need to move beyond high school, and certainly they need to pursue that. But I think that we will start to see a lot of what's being called stackable credentials. So that means getting a certificate and a badge, and they stack into something, but it's not necessarily predetermined, and it doesn't happen in a very linear way. So it might be, I'm going to have 2 or 3 certificates. I might get one virtually, I might get one in person, and then I'm going to go work. I'm going to learn and earn, as we're calling it. And I might be able to find universities. I think the ones that are really going to survive and thrive are going to be figuring out how to partner with business and let business let them in on the teaching. Because I think that some of the business folks are at the front lines of what we're doing. In medicine, I think that's true too. And so maybe I have a credential that's coming from Microsoft, and maybe I have one that's coming from Rochester Institute of Technology, and I'm combining them and seeing where I go from there. But we're seeing so many colleges close on a pretty regular basis, and the financial pressures that COVID put in are going to just hasten that. The market compression is like nothing we've ever seen before, because not only are you seeing universities that have only taught in person and are so focused on this in-person experience, but you're also seeing the Microsoft universities of the world. So you've got the virtual compression, and then you've also got these employers who are, they're teaching their employees, and they're saying we don't think that they need a degree from, here or there necessarily. So it's going to shrink and change.
Yeah. So what did you do at University of Denver during COVID for students?
We really listened. So I was asked, we created this home and this sense of belonging within the Women's College. And so a little bit before COVID, the chancellor came to me and said, we need an accelerant for our strategic plan. And we think that accelerant is community. We think that it is about belonging, and it's about people feeling like they can all work together. And will you lead a project called Community Plus Values? We'd like to redefine the values of the university, and we'd like to bring people together so that they belong not just to the business school or we didn't have a medical school, the business school or the engineering school, but that they belong to DU. And we started down that path, and COVID came. And we had to, it was like, I didn't know where to point the headlamp, really, in leadership for a while. And then I was reminded, Mark and I didn't come along and say, like, oh, we should build a playground, right? Our community of friends came around us, and we all did it together. So I turned to the community, and through this project, we started asking them what they needed, and we developed what was the most visited part of the DU web sphere. We had, I think, 35,000 visits in the first 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
We did 60 different webinars, and we did them on things like spirituality and we brought in people from hospitals to talk about what was going on with COVID, and we brought the head of the Graduate School for Professional Psychology, Dean Smith Acuna. She was wonderful, and she was a guest on many of our webcasts. And I think by listening and hearing what people needed and being in touch with them, we were able to bring the community together. The coolest thing was, as we got our hands around COVID, I would say, right? We're wondering what's going to happen in these next few months. As we got our arms around COVID, there was this extraordinary sense of pride across the campus. We had these faculty who were experts in all kinds of things that were relevant to what was going on, and they stepped up. I mean, what we learned and what we taught people was extraordinary. And so I think to be part of the team and part of the community, because you've been asked, because you've been invited, was really huge. So that's what I did. We brought together the community. I would be remiss if I didn't say that, we also had a different kind of challenge, which is we are all very, very focused on race and equity through that period of time, and we still are. And so we listened for that too. And we did what we could to make sure that this campus didn't just belong to a certain profile of student, but it could belong to everybody. That was
Great.
big.
We're out of time, but I have one question I always like to finish
Yes.
with. It's shaped a little bit for each of our guests. And if a young Chautauquan came to you and expressed an interest in becoming a builder and having a career like yours, what would be your counsel?
Be curious. Just be curious. Say yes to everything that you can possibly say yes to, and see where the road will lead you. It wasn't until pretty far in my career that I had the opportunity to work with a coach, and I said, "Gosh, I've done law and I've done business development and I've done consulting and communications," and that person looked at me and said, "Well, don't you see that your thread is that you pour water and sunshine on things worth growing? You're a builder." And so the pattern may not emerge from the get-go, but if you follow and you're curious, I think that it all comes together.
It's fantastic.
So.
We're out of time, and this has been so much fun.
It has been so much fun.
And I hope you'll come back.
Yes, I will. And I hope that you'll come to my porch, because like I said, I want to hear a little bit more about you and your
Deal.
career. All right.
Deal. Got to have some good lemonade like you did the last time.
Exactly.
Okay.
We
Thank
can
you
do
so
that.
very much.
Yeah, thank you.